Perfect. And the clock just struck 10 o'clock for me. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in our webinar today. This is the first of 4 master classes that will be happening this year. So, we are really lucky to have Julien joining us today. Julien Simon is the co-founder of OneUp Digital Marketing, and he'll really just be walking us through how to change, what you can do with the real life data and get more return on your investments. So marketing is a really big topic. So thank you, Julien, for joining us today and kind of walking us through this. My name is Tova. I'm an account manager here with Rezgo, and I'll be managing the Q&A today. And any questions that come up from you guys. So I see a lot of familiar faces and names. It's nice to have you all joining us today. A few housekeeping items before I pass it over to Julien here is this session is recorded and you will get a recording after this if anything is to pull you away. We'll also be in touch with support documents on how to implement this within your Rezgo account once the new integration is live. And there is a Q&A portion at the end of today's session. So any questions that come up, feel free to put them in the Q&A, chat with us. If we don't have time to get you an answer this morning, we'll be following up after with more information. So Julien, thank you for joining us today, and I will let you take it over.
Yeah, thanks, Tava, and hello, everyone. Let me start here. Yeah, this is a webinar around marketing, not flying blind, as Tava mentioned. Thanks for joining us today. As Tava mentioned, my name is Julien. I co-founded OneUp Digital Marketing in 2013. A little bit about my background. I love data-based marketing, not guesswork marketing. So this presentation is very close to my heart. We're going to tackle something here that I think comes up regularly for a lot of tourism operators. And by the end of this session, it'll be clear as to why it matters. So here's the situation I think a lot of you can relate with. So you're spending money on Google Ads, you're running with the ads campaign, you're doing the work, or your team is, or your agency is. But when you open your reports, the numbers just don't add up. Bookings are coming in, you can see them in your dashboard, but your ad platforms are taking credit for maybe half of them on a good day. In your gut it should be more. You're spending good money to get these clients, but the data just doesn't align. You're not sure where they're coming from. Does that sound familiar? Anybody here can relate? Drop a me or something like that in the chat. So you're not alone in that situation. And Tova will be, I think, monitoring the chat. So today we're going to explain as to exactly why that happens and walk you through a solution that Rezgo has built to fix it. There you go. Andrew is saying he's in it. So yeah, I'm sure Andrew, you're not alone. But by the end of the session, you'll understand the problem clearly. You'll see the solution, the implementation path for the solution, and have some ideas of the almost limitless opportunities that new clean data can bring forward. Little fair warning, we're going to get a little technical in the middle, but we'll keep it grounded. We'll use some real life example to make it relatable. Okay, let's dive in. So here's the plan for today. I just want to walk you through quickly so you know what's coming. We'll start with the problem itself, the gap between your real bookings and what your ad platforms are reporting and why that's costing you money every single day. Then we'll get into the why, the technical root causes. I know not all of you care about the technical aspect of it, but I think it's important to understand why you're not getting good data and what you can do about it. After that, we'll look honestly at what other platforms are offering in this space and where they fall short. I'm sure not everybody here operates on Rezgo, so it's good to know what you're currently getting. If you're not on Rezgo, can you drop the name of the booking platform you use in the chat? That'd be a good information to have. But and then we'll show you what Rezgo has built to solve the issue. My team and the Rezgo team have been working side by side for the last few months to build a custom solution to solve exactly this issue. And at the end, and that's the fun part, we'll follow a tour operator through 4 scenarios that show exactly what you can do when your data is finally working. We'll have time at the end for questions and answers, but feel free to drop some in the chat as we go along, and Tova can monitor and make a list of them. And as she said, if we don't have time to answer all the questions, we can answer them in a follow-up. So let's start with something here I want to sit with for a second, because I think a lot of you have been here or are here now. This is the situation we're dealing with. It's Monday morning, you had a great weekend, you open your booking platform, You open the dashboard, you see 40 bookings. That's nice. You're feeling good. And now you want to see where those bookings are coming from. So you open Google Ads, it shows you 8 conversions. You open Meta Ads, you see another 6 in there. So your ad platforms are taking credits for 14 bookings out of 40. Now, where did the other 26 bookings go? They didn't just vanish into thin air. So they almost certainly, hopefully, showing up somewhere in your GA4 reports. They may not be in the ad platforms, but they will be in your GA4 reports, hopefully. Some of them will be sitting on a direct traffic, and that's the catch-all bucket that GA4 uses, which has no idea where a session is coming from. I call that the black hole where data goes to die. Some will be misattributed to the referral, and that's a channel where you can see the booking platform itself sending you a referral, but you know that they didn't come from the booking platform. A few might even be double counted in ways that make your number look better than they are in one place and worse in another. And that's actually the more dangerous problem. It's not always that the data is missing, it's often missing and it's often wrong. You're looking at reports and sometimes have an answer for every single booking, but they just have the wrong answers. So your Google Ads look like it's converting at a certain rate, but is that rate accurate? Or is it only getting credit for the bookings it can see? Your direct traffic looks high, and that's a problem. How much of that is actually paid social that lost its attribution the moment someone entered the booking widget? That's what we call the invisible leak. The bookings are there, the revenue is real, but the map your ad platforms are showing you just doesn't match your territory. And when you make budget decisions based on that map, you're flying blind. You don't know where you're going, you don't know where you're coming from, and this will cause you to make mistakes with your marketing decisions. I named 3 here as an example: pausing a profitable campaign, scaling a losing campaign, or misattributing traffic budgets to the wrong platforms altogether. There are obviously a bunch of other bad consequences we could mention. Those are 3 of the obvious ones. But the good news is the cause of these tracking issues is not some unsolvable mystery. It has a name, it has a fix. So let's get into it. See, Roger's on Fair Harbor. Thanks, Roger, for the information. All right, so this is a slide. Well, we're going to get a little nerdy, but I promise it's worth it, because once this clicks, everything else we talk about today will make total sense. So just stick with me for a couple of minutes. So most booking platforms like Fair Harbor, Zola, Zowie, and yes, Rezgo as well, handle the checkout inside something called an iframe. They have to do that for safety reasons because users break things and for security data. So if you didn't use an iframe, users would be able to break everything in the booking engine. So they don't want that, and for privacy reason. This is what an iframe looks like. The website is in the blue. The blue square is our websites. The outer frame, we call it, is your client website. And then where you display your tours, that's the iframe. So this is an example of the Rezgo iframe. It looks the same on other platforms. And it's a little window inside your website. So to give you an analogy, think of the iframe like a little window cut into your wall. Your house is your website. But the little booking widget that people go to, that's a tiny window to a completely different building. And that building is where people go to book your tours. So the guest walks through your front door onto your website. And when they go to book, they step through that window into a different building to complete the transaction. And this is where every browser comes in, whether it's Chrome, Safari, Firefox. They all have a built-in security rule called the same origin policy. And its job is to make sure that different websites can't snoop on each other's data. And that sounds great, and it is great. It's a good thing to have. Except it also means that your website, the outer frame, the blue thing I showed, and the booking iframe are treated as 2 completely separate entities. They're unrelated. So by default, they cannot share information with each other. So in real life, it goes like this. Your guest clicks on your Instagram ad. For example, they land on your site, the tracking fires, you can see them in GA4, everything is working. They browse your tour, is still working, and then they click on the booking widget, and that's the moment that thread just snaps. The ad click happened on your domain, your URL, your website, and the booking completion happens on the booking platform's domain. So if we don't build a deliberate bridge between the two, those events never get connected, and you don't see the full attribution of those bookings. So the results, GA4 will see a session that starts with an Instagram click, and then you'll see nothing. Meta will see a click with no purchase. Google Ads will see a click with no conversion. Every platform concludes that those campaigns didn't work. Meanwhile, you're looking at 40 real bookings in your dashboard, asking yourself, what's going on here? So the only real fix is for the booking platform to actively pass the data from the iframe back onto the main website. We use a mechanism called the post message. It's basically a little slot in the wall and you pass notes through. And that's what other booking platforms are trying to do, but don't do very well. And that's what Rezgo has built really well. And I want to show you exactly how in just a few slides. So I want to be very fair here. FareHarbor, Zola, Zawi, just to name a few, all have tracking integrations. They all have tracking implementations. They aren't broken per se, but in practice, they often leave you with a partial picture only. For example, from their own documentation in our own experience, we see that FareHarbor primarily focuses on the purchase event. This is when people put the booking through. So you do see the finish line, but you don't see the whole race. So it's very hard for you to know where you're losing people mid-funnel. Zola uses the data layer. It's a right approach, but it struggles a lot with the iframe isolation, as we mentioned, the separation between two iframes. So browser privacy settings often cut the connection between the booking window and your reports. With Zawi, we have a number of clients on Zawi, and we see that all the bones are there. They do a fairly good job, but you're responsible for building every single tag and trigger from scratch. They sometimes change their event names, they change their data layer, and it has broken integration on a number of our clients, and it's forcing us to rebuild everything manually, and that takes a long time. So in the real world, what that means is you're either managing two separate systems side by side, or you have to spend hours in Google Tag Manager trying to fix those discrepancies. So we're not saying you'll never have a data gap, because perfect data and perfect tracking does not exist. But what we're saying is you shouldn't be losing data just because your booking platform and your marketing tools aren't speaking the same language. Does that make sense so far? So I'm going to stay nerdy here for just one more slide, maybe two. Just stick with me. And this is one I think it will make a lot of things click for you guys, especially if you've ever opened Meta Ads and you go to your Meta Ads Manager dashboard and you see a purchase and it has $0 in revenue. Anybody in the chat has ever dealt with that? How many of you actually monitor purchases from Meta Ads and see $0 in Meta? So here's a concept behind all the events we track, all the e-commerce events, and we'll cover those in a little bit, like view item, add to cart, purchase. There's something called the data layer. And I'm sure some of you know what it is, but I'm equally as sure know that most of you don't. So let me explain what it is because it's important. So think of the data layer as a digital order slip. Every time a guest does something on your site, the platform fills out a new line on that order slip. And then Google Tag Manager, which is the delivery driver, picks up that slip and takes the information to GA4, to Google Ads, to Meta Ads. But here's the thing. Every single of those platforms speaks a slightly different dialect. GA4 has very specific requirements on how your data needs to be structured. A booking with a price of 149 versus a booking with a price of 149.00 makes the whole difference in the world. The one with 149 means nothing to GA4. The one with 149.00 means, okay, that's a price because it has two decimal after the dollar, and that's a requirement. Meta, for example, needs the revenue and the value and the currency to be at the event level, not buried inside some sub-objects. And critically, Meta needs that value to be a number and not a string. What we've noticed from our experience with other booking platforms is they'll put the price like 149, for example, and they'll put quotation on each side of the price because that's the way all of the data is handled in the data layer. But that looks very trivial, and I'll show an example in the next slide. But to Meta system, the one with the no quote is revenue. The other one with a quote is a string. It's not a value, and that's why you see the $0 purchase problem. The conversion fires properly. Meta sees it, it counts it, but the revenue shows as zero because the formatting of that value is wrong. It's coming as a text instead of a number. Google Ads has same issue, but a different angle. If the conversion values aren't passed through correctly, then all your smart bidding algorithm is optimizing for any booking it can. It cannot tell the difference between a $49 kayak rental and a $499 private charter. So it will happily keep sending you the cheapest, easiest booking because those are the ones it thinks you want. So clean data is not a nice to have. It directly affects how much you pay for every single booking. So here's an example of the data layer. On the left is an example purchase event that is wrong and will not send the value to GA4. On the right, you can see it doesn't have the quote around 149 in the value. That will send the value properly to GA4. We see a lot of items, a lot of events in other booking platforms that use that question mark because it is around the purchase, it's around transaction ID, the item ID, the item name, it's everywhere. And this is just one small example. Again, if you don't put the .00, that value will mean nothing either. So there's a lot of very finicky formatting that needs to happen at the layer for that value to be passed on properly. So now we're going to talk about the events that can tell you the full story of what's happening with your customer journey. We're coming out of the technical weeds a little bit now. I want to show you what good actually looks like, because knowing what's broken is only useful if you know what you're aiming for. And this picture I'm having there is what you're aiming for. So a complete tracking setup captures 5 events across your guest booking journey. It has a couple more that we can add as a optional, but those are the 5 that we want to focus on. Think of them as 5 heartbeats. Each one tells you something different about where your guest is and how serious they are. So the first, it's called view item list. This fires when someone is just scrolling you through your site and see a bunch of tour listings. They're just window shopping at this moment. The second is the view item. They've clicked on a specific tour page. They're interesting, they're getting more details, they're warming up a bit. The third one is called add to cart. Add to cart is where they've picked a date, they've picked a group site, and they've added the tour to their cart. So now we're talking, the commitment has started, they're getting a lot more warm. The fourth is the begin checkout. They've hit the book now in the cart, they're entering their email and their names, their wallet is basically out. And the fifth one is the purchase. They've crossed the finish line, they've made that purchase, they've gone on a confirm page, they're now a client. But here's why all 5 matters. If you only track the purchase, like a lot of these platforms do, which as mentioned earlier, all you get is a single data point at the end of the journey. You can see the people booked, but you have no idea where everyone else went. No idea how they got there, or they're dropping off at your listings page and then never clicking through, or they're clicking into the tour and leaving at the date picker, or they're getting to the checkout and then bailing when they see the final price. You just don't know. And each of the scenarios has a very completely different fix. So without a full picture, you are just guessing. And in marketing, as we know, guessing is expensive. So these 5 events are also the foundation for everything we're going to cover in the second half of this session. So try to remember them, keep that in mind. They're what makes the real powerful stuff possible. So how do we get that clean data properly formatted, delivered to all 3 platforms that I mentioned, GA4, Google Ads, and Meta, at the same time without running 3 complete different setups? And the answer for that is Google Tag Manager. I don't know if some of you know or all of you know Google Tag Manager. We'll say GTM moving forward, save some time. But it's a very important thing to know as well. And then we're gonna dive into the scenarios a little bit after that. So as I mentioned, Google Tag Manager is a delivery driver that bridges the gap between the data layer, what we just looked at, and then the platform like GA4, Google Ads, Meta Ads, all the other platform. So think of GTM as a very organized dispatcher. It's sitting in the middle of your operation. Your website passes it information. Someone viewed a tour, someone added to the cart, someone just bought. And GTM's job is to take that information and route it into the right places in the right format. So it's one clean source, the data layer, multiple destinations. And GTM is the messenger that passes that clean data into the destination. So instead of connecting everything to Meta separately and GA4 separately and Google Ads separately and praying they're all consistent and working, you connect them all through Google Tag Manager. The real valuable thing about GTM is it lets you enforce the formatting before anything gets sent out. So if Meta is the revenue value as a number, as I mentioned, and it arrives as a string, GTM can fix that in transit. You set the rule once, and it applies to every single event after that forever. The challenge, and this is where historically it gets hard, is that configuring GTM correctly for all 3 platforms across the iframe boundary we talked about with the right data formatting is quite complex. is the kind of thing that can take an experienced specialist hours or days just to set up. And if one thing is misconfigured, like the quotes or like the 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 decimals, or the booking engine changes the data year, or they change their event name, often you won't even notice. All you see is that the data will just quietly disappear. And that's exactly the problem that Rezgo's new implementation takes off your plate. So let's look at what they've built. So the Rezgo solution, here's the good stuff. This is what we've been waiting for. So let's walk you through exactly what Rezgo has built, because it addresses each of the problems we described in a very deliberate way. So there's three components to the solution, and they all work together. The component one is the iframe bridge we mentioned. Remember that window cut into the wall and the booking widget that's on a different domain? Rezgo has built a post-message listener that actually shouts across that boundary. Every time an e-commerce event happens inside the iframe, Rezgo's code will send a structured message to your parent page. That page catches it, the tracking thread is intact, and the connection is done properly. This is where most platforms use this bridge for you to figure out yourself. So with Rezgo now, it is built in. The component number two, a clean pre-formatted data layer, the data layer that we mentioned with the data, the transaction ID, the item name, all this kind of information about your tours. This is where the $0 revenue and other problems get solved. So when those events arrive on your page, they are not rough, they're not loosely structured, they're pre-formatted to match the exact schema that GA4, Google Ads, and Meta require. The value field is a number with 2 digits after the period. The currency is present, that's a mandatory. The transaction ID is present, that's also mandatory. The item array is structurally correct. The event names match GA4's prescribed naming convention exactly. We've seen that in the past where the names don't quite match exactly, and then GA4 sees those events but doesn't know what to do with them. It doesn't know they are e-commerce event to build a funnel. Every parameter has to be in the exact right place. So that's component number two. And the component number three, it's pre-built Google Tag Manager recipe. And this is the part that makes the biggest practical difference to you guys for operators. So rather than asking you to go and build all the tags, all the triggers, and the variables, like in Fair Harbor, for example, and you have to build everything from scratch, that's easy to get wrong. It's very complex. Rezgo and our team have done that work for you. So you get a complete, ready to deploy GTM container that covers all 5 e-commerce events, run it correctly to all 3 different platforms. So those 3 things together close the loop completely. The data that was disappearing in the iframe gap now flows cleanly. It's correctly formatted to GA4, Google Ads, and Meta, and you don't have to build any of it from scratch. So it comes on to this. What does implementation look like? How easy it is to make this a reality? So now that we've talked about the solution, we're going to talk a little bit about how to implement it. So as we said before, doing this from scratch is generally complex work. You have to bridge the iframes, you have to format the data layer, you have to wire GTM correctly, and it's a lot of work. And we know because we've done it. So with Rezgo, you get GTM recipes now, and there's going to be documentation and links to those recipes. And it's a very different story. All you have to do, step one, if you don't have a GTM account, you need to create it. And then in Rezgo backend, you can just enter the ID of the GTM container. That's it. And then you collect the platform IDs for GA4, Google Ads, and Meta Ads. And step two, you import the GTM container file into your GTM account. So the GTM container file is the recipe that I mentioned that we've pre-built for you that includes all of the correct configuration. You don't have to build anything from scratch. The only thing you have to do in step 3 is you add your own ID. So your GA4 ID in there, your Google Ads ID, your Meta Pixel ID, and then you publish, and that's it. You just want to make sure, step 5, that you didn't have any e-commerce. If you have a GTM account already firing, that you don't have any other e-commerce event firing there, because it could double fire and count the data. So you just want to make sure that you turn off everything e-commerce ready before. But that's it. So what used to be a multi-day project turns into maybe, if you know what you're doing, a few minutes. If you don't know, maybe an afternoon, if you're reading the documentation. And the best part is that when Rezgo updates something, you're not rebuilding it from scratch, because Rezgo controls the data layer and everyone has the same setup. So that's a big difference. So now that we've covered the problem, we've covered the root cause, the fix, and the setup, the question that really matters is, so what? What does this mean for you? What does it mean for your business in real life? So clean data can unlock many things. And here's 4 examples of what I love about this solution. None of this solution require you to spend more on advertising. All they do is require better data with it. So the first one is funnel diagnostics. You can see every step of the booking journey, like we mentioned, from the window shopping all the way to the purchase event. You can see exactly where your guests are dropping off, and you can fix the right thing instead of guessing. The second one is precision retargeting. When your add to cart fires correctly, you suddenly have access to an audience of people who almost booked, but not quite. And that's one of the most valuable audiences in digital advertising. And right now, most operators can't see it. The third one is true attribution. Without that gap between the iframes, the full journey is tracked. You stop cutting campaigns that are quietly doing the most important work because you can finally see what's working for you. And the fourth one is value-based bidding. And this is where you're pushing the conversion value into Google Ads correctly. You can tell the algorithm to go find your best guest, not just any guests. And AI is only as smart as the data you feed it. So the better data for Google Ads, the better the platform will work for you. So instead of just describing this in an abstract, I want to show them to you in action. So we're going to follow one operator. I call her Maya through all 4 of the scenarios. Each one is a potential real life scenario with specific numbers and specific results. So let's go meet Maya. Here's Maya. She runs a small coastal tour company. She only has 3 tours, a lean team, and a genuine love for what she does. She also has a real marketing budget she has to work hard to make count. $2,000 a month across Google Ads and Meta. That's her marketing budget. Last week was a great week for Maya. She had 40 bookings, about 6,800 in revenue. She can see it all in her Rezgo dashboard or whatever platform you're using. She can see the dates, she can see the tours, she can see the guest, and it feels great. And then she opens Google Ads, 11 conversions. She opens Meta, 8 conversions. So as I said, her ad platforms are collectively taking credits for 19 out of 40 bookings. More than half of her revenue is completely invisible to the platform she's paying to generate it. It's probably missing altogether or stuck in the black hole of direct traffic. So she doesn't know whether her Instagram ads are the thing that's bringing her well-watching crowd or whether that's all coming from Google. She doesn't know if guests are dropping off at the listings page or the date picker or somewhere else in the checkout. Last month, she nearly turned off her Instagram campaign entirely because for 2 weeks straight, she saw 0 conversions. She thought it was dead weight. She just kept it on running on gut instinct, a feeling that it was working somehow, even though the data said otherwise. I'm sure you all have had that gut feeling at some point. In this scenario, the gut feeling is completely right because Maya is a rock star. But she was one bad week away from hitting one of her best performing campaigns based on nothing else than broken data. So if any of this is unfamiliar, stay with us because what changes for Maya over the next 4 slides is directly relevant to what can change for your business too. So the very first thing that Maya does once she has the clean data implemented from the Rezgo solution is open her funnel tracking. So that's all 5 e-commerce events we mentioned before, from the window shopping all the way to the purchase. And that's a simple report to pull, like a minute or so. And she can see how many people are viewing each tour page and how many of those actually go to add a tour to the cart. So what she finds here is quite worth paying attention to. So the well-watching tour, it looks very healthy. About 45% of the people who viewed the page go on to select a date and add it to the cart. That's a good progression. People are interested in the tour. They're advancing through the funnel, through the customer journey. That's great. But the Sunset Kayak tour, that's a completely different story. She's actually getting nearly as much traffic to the kayak tour and the well-watching tour. But about 380 views are put there in about the past 30 days. But only 41 of those out of 380, so that's just 11%, added to the cart. There's 399 people who looked at the Sunset Kayak tour and just walked away without doing anything. Before clean tracking, Maya just thought, hey, the kayak tour is just less popular. It sells less, therefore fewer people wants it. That makes sense, right? But the funnel data tells her a completely different story. people are curious enough to go click through that tour, and they go check the page, and they go view the item almost as much as a whale watching tour. And they're just not converting once they get there. That's a very completely different problem, as it's just not as popular. And it's a very completely different fix. So the hunch that she has, the page is underselling the kayak tour experience. A whale watching tour has an obvious hook. It's big whale, big animal on a boat. It's exciting. A kayak tour needs a little more work on the page to communicate that experience, and the page just wasn't doing that. So what does she do? She rewrites the description of the page. She adds a proper what's included section. She updates a photo. She updates an FAQ to the page. And then 4 weeks later, she looks at her funnel again. And now the Sunset Kayak add to cart rate. So people that view the kayak tour and add it to the cart climbed from 11% to 29%. So the one page change that took her an afternoon to make generates roughly about 12 additional bookings per month from traffic she was already paying for. No new ad spend needed. She was just finally being able to see the real problem with that page. The second scenario we put there, and this one is worth paying close attention to, because it involves an audience that 3 months earlier didn't exist for Maya. Not because the people weren't there, but just because she couldn't see them. So her GA4 funnel data, and that's a report that we can pull in GA4, last month showed that 68 people added her whale watching tour to the cart, as we mentioned. They went to the page, they picked a date, they chose a group size, and they got all the way to the checkout screen, and then they left without booking. Boo, that is not good. But now think about those people, who they are for a second. They're not just casual browsers who stumble across a website. These are people who made a decision. They picked a date. They thought about who they were going to bring. And then something made them stop. Maybe they got interrupted. Maybe they went to check in with a friend first. Maybe the final total was a bit more than what they expected, and they just needed a moment to make the decision. But whatever it is, those are the warmest non-customer in Maya's entire world. This is the one audience you should really go after. So before Rezgo's implementation, the add to cart event is misfiring. The 68 people were completely invisible to her ad platforms. They just vanished. But now Maya can build a custom meta audience exactly for these people. So she can run a straightforward retargeting ad with a photo of the boat, a text that says, "Still thinking about it? July spots are filling up. Hurry and grab yours now." That's it. Just a simple retargeting ad, a picture, and a bit of urgency. She spends $180 over 2 weeks on that ad. 14 out of 60 people come back and book at $299 each. That's $4,186 in revenue from a $180 ad. It's a 23x return on an audience that didn't exist in her data 3 months ago. So I want to be clear. That's more than a theoretical number to illustrate a concept. That's what happens when you give good marketer the right data and you let them do their job. The situation number 3 that we mentioned earlier is the Instagram campaign. Remember the one campaign that Maya nearly killed? There was 2 weeks, 0 track conversion. The logical call based on the data she had was to just turn it off and move the budget somewhere else. A lot of us have done it before. So let's just come back to that moment, because this is where attribution data pays for itself. So with the full journey tracking now in place, Maya can pull the actual customer path in GA4. She wants to understand, for the bookings she made last month, where did those guests actually come from? What touched them before they book? And what she finds is pretty significant. She sees that 71% of her Google search conversions, so the booking that came from people searching her tour name and clicked on a branded Google ad, had an Instagram touch point before. So they saw an Instagram ad, they didn't book right away, they went about with their week, and they came back via Google when they were ready to book. So Instagram is the introduction, Google search is the closer. So they work as a team. One plants the seeds, the other one harvests it. But when the tracking is broken, that Instagram touch point is completely invisible. It never makes it to GA4, it never shows up in meta reporting, and it never gets counted anywhere. So all Maya could see was 0 conversion on Instagram and a Google search campaign that looked like it was doing all the work on its own. So if she'd cut Instagram, all those introductions to her brand would have stopped. So fewer new people would have discovered her. And over the following weeks, the Google search conversion would have started to quietly decline. The branded search campaign would have looked like fine for a little bit and then just gone worse. And it's hard to also connect those two reasons without the clear data. So that's the real cause of broken tracking. It's just not just the wrong numbers, but the wrong decisions made with complete confidence, because you can see that you spent X amount on a platform that brought 0 conversions. What you can't see is what's missing until the data is finally working. And the last one for Maya, and this one brings us full back circle to the data layer conversation we had earlier, because the whole thing hinges on one very small technical detail. So Maya runs 3 tours. Remember, she has the CAC rental, $89, the whale watching trip at $299, and the $499 private charters. Very different price points for her different offerings. From a revenue perspective, getting one charter guest through the door is worth almost 6 CAC rentals. So that's not a small difference. And before the implementation, Maya's Google Ads account was set on maximize conversions, which I'm willing to bet a lot of you run Google Ads or set up with the same maximize conversion bidding strategy. And that sounds great. It basically tells Google, get as many bookings as possible within budget. And Google was doing exactly that. It's very efficient. It's routing traffic towards our $89 CAC tour. It's easy conversions, low commitment, plenty of availability. So the algorithm, as far as Google is concerned, is doing its job perfectly. The problem is that Maya had not given it the complete right data to work with. So with the conversion value that's now passing properly to Google Ads, Maya is switching to target ROAS, which is target return on ad spend. So she's now essentially saying to the algorithm in Google Ads, I just don't want bookings, I want revenue. So go find me the guest who spend more. And now the algorithm knows the difference between an $89 booking and a $499 booking. And those are not identical. So over 6 weeks, because you have to let some time for the algorithm to work through that transition, without touching her budget, her average order value climbs from 124 to 193. Same ad spend, just more revenue per booking. The algorithm just found her better guests because she finally gave it the information it needed to do so. And what made that possible? Just the price field in her data layer being the number 299 instead of string quote 299 with a quote. That's it. That's one single formatting detail, the thing we showed you in the code comparison earlier, and it can unlock an entirely different bidding strategy for you, and it can make a big difference in your results. And that's how much the details matter. I see there's some questions. I'm almost done with this, and I'll get to the question right after. Yeah, so let's have a little bit of fun and look at what Maya's business looked like 4 months on the road. So she has fixed the funnel diagnostic. She caught a conversion problem with the sunset character she had no way of seeing before. One afternoon of page updates, 12 extra bookings per month from traffic she was already paying for. The cart abandonment retargeting campaign that she added for the people that added the tour to the cart but didn't finish. So $180 in ad spend, 4,886 in revenue, a 23x return from an audience she didn't know existed 3 months earlier. The attribution data that saved her Instagram campaign altogether. And by extension, it protected the top of funnel leads coming through Google search. And this is a decision it's hard to monetize exactly, but it probably saved thousands of dollars from all the guests that wouldn't have found her if she stopped the Instagram campaign. And finally, the value-based bidding that pushed her average order from 124 to 193 within Google Ads. On 40 bookings a week, that's an extra 2,760 in weekly revenue from the exact same ad budget. So here's the thing I want to leave you with about Maya's story, is that she didn't have to spend an extra single dollar on advertising to get any of these results. Every single gain came from finally being able to see clearly what was already happening before and making better decisions because of it. But here's the thing, clean data doesn't manage itself. Someone still needs to look at the numbers regularly, spot the opportunities, and act on them. So if you already have a digital marketing team, this is going to make their lives a lot easier. They're going to love you for this. You give them the clean data, you get out of their way, and you watch them do their work. If you don't have a digital marketing partner, we do have a handful of spots open for March. After that, we're looking into April onboarding for new clients. So I can drop my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to see if you're a good fit, to see if you're interested. And finally, before we go to the Q&A session, very important part before wrapping up, privacy, cookie changes are on a lot of operators' radar right now. I want to address it honestly. Safari was the first one to act. They've been blocking third-party cookies since 2020. Firefox followed right after. Chrome has been in the process of phasing them out. Then they changed their mind. They said they weren't. Then they said they were. They're kind of unsure about it. But this matters because the old way of tracking, which is you drop a pixel on the confirmation page and you rely on the third-party cookies to connect all the dots, that's getting less reliable every year on every single browser. So the good news about Rezgo's implementation is that it's built in a way that's more resilient to these changes. The data is pushed from the iframe onto your own website data layer, and then it's sent out to the platforms from your own domain. So it behaves more like a first-party data collection. It's not relying on third-party cookies to work, and that's the problem with data. So that makes it more meaningful, more stable as browsers continue to tighten their privacy. So I want to be honest, it's not a magic immunity shield. No tracking setup is completely immune to privacy changes. But what it does is it puts you in a considerably stronger position than operators who are still relying on pixel only or a confirmation page setup. As the landscape keeps shifting, which it will, having a solid data layer foundation like Rezgo is offering now means you're building on something that's very stable rather than having to piece things together as things change. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. We have about 15 or so minutes for question and answers.
That was so great, Julien. Thank you for just taking the time and kind of laying that out. I know personally, I work with so many of our different operators. They own businesses, and a lot of the responsibilities they face today didn't even exist years ago. So to even wrap your head around the acronyms of it, how to implement the next steps, it's such a big project, but it just feels a lot more realistic, kind of having you guide us through it. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, and it changes every week. It's yeah.
Exactly, right? So how do you even keep up when you're running a business and running tours? And so this was really, really valuable. We did have a few chats come in. Anyone who has questions that kind of came up during the session, feel free to add them to the chat now. Okay, they're kind of firing in now. So we'll start off with the first one is, how do I know if my tracking is currently broken?
Yeah, so the quickest way to check if your tracking is broken is to compare the number you see in your booking platform, whether it's Rezgo, Zola, Fair Harbor, Zawi, any of those. And you compare those numbers against the GA4 purchases for the same time period. And there's always a bit of a different gap because of attribution, but it shouldn't be a significant gap. Anything more than 10, 15, 20% means something is misfiring. If you look at the Meta Ads platform and you see purchases with $0 revenue, that's a sure telltale that's something is not firing properly. If you go to Google Ad GA4 and look at the funnel report, does it populate or does it just show purchase? That's it. You'll often see just the purchase event in there. If you look at the data between GA4, Google Ads, and Meta Ads, do those three platforms align? There's a few things like this that you can look at in about 5-10 minutes and be like, my tracking is working, or no, my tracking is broken. But the first step is compare the number between GA4 and your platform in terms of number of purchases. That's number one. Again, sometimes you'll see the purchase, but that's it. You won't see any of the customer journey. You won't see any of the attribution. So then you want to dig a little further after that.
Okay, great. And the same person had another question about how long before they could start to see meaningful data after setup.
Yeah, so after you set it up, after you import the GTM recipe, you publish it, everything is working fine, you will start seeing those events instantly. Like a minute later, somebody adds somebody to the cart, it will fire and push that data into your GA4 account. What you need to do is leave a bit of time for the ad platforms and for some of the funnels to build. You want the data to be statistically significant. So if you publish the Rezgo solution, you wait like a couple days and then you see the funnel, it's going to be based on a few people. So I would say wait 3, 4, 5 weeks in order to let that data populate so you have a bigger sample to take from so you can draw a conclusion. Because data that's on a too short of a time frame or with not enough people in it can also lead you to the wrong conclusion. So you want to make sure that that is statistically significant enough that you're not drawing the wrong conclusion from the right data.
Great, thank you. And then the last two are kind of in the same vein. So one of them was, is this only useful for Google and Meta, or does it work for other platforms? And then we had another person specifically ask, does TikTok integrate similarly?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Right now, the recipes we've built are from GA4, Google Ads, and Meta Ads. However, the foundation of the work, the bridging the two iframe in the website, making the data layer as clean as possible, that's platform agnostics. So once the events are set and clean in Google Tag Manager, you can just route them to any platform you like. I mentioned Google Tag Manager is the delivery driver that will take the information, clean it up, and pass it to the different platforms. You can definitely take it and pass it to TikTok. You can pass it to any platform of your choice. They are platform agnostic. They work from the same data layer. So what works with Google Ads and Meta Ads will also work with TikTok. It's just not in the recipe that we have built at this very moment.
Okay, excellent. This one is kind of bringing me back to when you were talking about how different browsers were filtering different privacy. One of the questions is, can ad blockers interfere with tracking codes that I add to my site? Is that something that's changing frequently? How does that work?
Yes, it's changing very
Yeah.
very frequently. It does have an impact on the data they send. A lot of ad blockers on different browsers could block some of that data, and it's the reason why we say data will never 100% be perfect. You always have some data that's missing here and there based on the different user behavior, based on the different technology that they use. They can definitely have an effect, but having the right technology will can help mitigate some of the data. Uh, there's also the cookie compliance issues that we've seen with the cookie. Do I accept the cookies, all the essential cookies, this kind of thing? And there's something for advanced setup that won't fire some specific events about yourself, but will help Google build a model around the data without sending your privacy or your private information to Google. So there's there can be some data missing. So you can never rely 100% of data being like this is the source of truth, the 100% of the truth. There's always some revenue, some booking that can be missed from the platforms. Yeah.
Okay, great. I just wanted to speak to all of our Rezgo joiners who are using already the system and may be familiar with our Google Analytics that are found in your settings. We talked a little bit today about this integration and how you can enhance on answering the questions that maybe you don't get the full picture yet. So we've worked tirelessly with OneUp Digital Marketing to really work on enhancing our Google Analytics integration, and we're really, really excited for it to go live. We will be in touch with everyone when that goes on just how to implement it and make sure, like Julien said, like you're taking the guess out of where your money's being spent and where the reward is coming from. So we are really, really excited for that. We have 3 more sessions on this 4-series masterclass with industry experts. So stay tuned for our next session. We'll be sending out Julien's contact email as well, a little bit more information about their company if you want to take a closer look. They have been incredibly valuable to us. So yeah, thank you again, Julien, for taking the time meeting with us
Yeah,
today.
of
That was
course.
that was the last questions that came in, and I'm sure you're exhausted from leading that whole session. So thank you again. It was really, really valuable, and I'll be taking it myself moving forward, just working with accounts, and I'm just really excited about it. So thank you everyone for joining. We will be in touch later on with a recording. And if you have any other questions, ask us anytime at support@rezgo.com. We would love to chat about it. Like he said, it's changing all the time. So we could be having another conversation in the future about new changes again. It's very possible. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. And Julien, thank you again. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a great day, everyone. Bye.